Hi everyone and welcome back to the Data Football Club. It's been nearly 2 weeks since the Women's World Cup ended, and after a little break, it's time to analyze this thrilling tournament, see if my predictions were pretty accurate or completely wrong. So without further ado, let's get the ball rolling. Let's kick off with some overall statistics to highlight the great success that was this World Cup. The total attendance in the stadiums was just under 2 million people. To put this in perspective, the last Men's World Cup held in Qatar was attended by around 3.4 million people. For the 9th edition of the Women's World Cup, it seems like a great outcome considering the Men's World Cup had 22 editions already. This Women's World Cup was also a celebration all around the world. For the first time in the history of the Women's World Cup, all 6 confederations had a team in the round of 16. What's even more impressive is that 3 different countries from Africa qualified to the knockout rounds: Morocco, Nigeria, and South Africa. Now, let's talk a bit about the money. It's truly remarkable to see how the prize fund for the Women's World Cup has experienced a great boost. This year, the prize fund reached a whopping $110 million. That's nearly 4 times the amount it was back in 2019. In particular, the Spanish World Cup winners raked in a cool $10.5 million, and each player took $270,000 home. Even football clubs scored big time, as FIFA doled out over $11 million to the teams whose players were participating in the World Cup. Looking at the men's side of things, it is no surprise that the total prize money for the Qatar World Cup was 4 times larger, with $440 million in total. It is a remarkable figure, no doubt. But here's the kicker. It only increased by 40 million, so around a 10% increase, while the Women's World Cup total prize fund increased by 270%. Hence, the prize money for the Women's World Cup is making a strong stride forward. While there's still a gap when compared to the men's side, it's heartening to see that the divide is indeed getting narrower with each edition. It's now time to unravel the predictions I've made before and during the competition. So let's start with the predictions I made before the World Cup in a video which is available in the description below. If you've seen that video already, you know that I made 2 types of predictions. Qualitative ones based on my knowledge of women football at the time, and quantitative ones based on a Poisson regression model that I also explained in another video. Looking at the qualitative predictions, there were a few surprises for me, so let's start with those. I did not predict any group in the correct order, and I only got the 2 correct qualified teams in groups C and E. However, I correctly predicted that Spain would be in the final, so I'll take that. Now, let's turn to the quantitative predictions with the Poisson regression model. It is interesting to note that Spain had an 8% chance of winning the World Cup, while the USA, who were the favorites, had a 12% chance, according to the model. Also, one interesting point made by the model was that Australia had a 20% chance to be in the semi-finals. This is relatively high compared to what we could have expected from Australia before the competition, and highlights the importance of the home advantage in World Cups. Well done to the Matildas for reaching that stage for the first time in their history. Thus, with this model, we have a way to quantitatively assess the performance of teams a posteriori, or in other words, after the World Cup has ended. So let's look at the most underperforming and overperforming teams. Starting with the underperformers, in 3rd place, we have Canada, who had an 83% chance of qualifying to the round of 16, but did not. Kristen Sinclair, for her 5th World Cup, did not weigh in enough and missed an important penalty against Nigeria that could have qualified the Canadian. In 2nd place, we have Brazil, who had a 91% chance of qualifying to the round of 16, but did not. Again, with another football legend, Marta, for her 5th World Cup. After a terrific start against Panama, they lost against France with a solid game from the French, and really disappointed against Jamaica with a draw that kicked them out of the World Cup. And finally, at the top of the underperformers, we've got Germany. The 2 times World Cup winners went 28 years without a defeat in a group stage, and they had a whopping 94% chance of qualifying to the round of 16, but failed to do so. It was a surprising Colombian team that stepped in their way, which led to their first defeat in 28 years with a great performance from Linda Caicedo. Now, let's move on to the finest overperformers of the competition. Starting in the 3rd place with 3 teams on equal footing: Nigeria and Jamaica, who had a 10% chance of qualifying to the round of 16, and Colombia, who also had a 10% chance of qualifying to the quarterfinals, and all succeeded in doing so. In 2nd place, we've got South Africa, who only had a 7% chance of qualifying to the knockout rounds, and succeeded in doing so. I particularly enjoyed watching this team with their very dangerous quick transitions, speedy and technical players. And at the top of the overperformers, for their first ever World Cup, and with only 2% chance of qualifying to the round of 16 in a group with South Korea, Germany and Colombia, we have Morocco. After their terrible loss 6-0 against Germany in their first game, who would have thought that they would have been able to beat both South Korea and Colombia to qualify brilliantly to the knockout rounds? Let's now move on to my predictions throughout the competition, which were both a combination of quantitative and qualitative thinking. In the group stages, I got 26 correct winners with 5 exact scores predicted, while I got 12 correct winners and 1 perfect prediction in the knockout round. That is 54% accuracy for the group stages and 75% accuracy for the knockout rounds. This improvement in prediction accuracy between the group stages and the knockout rounds potentially means two things. Group stages usually require more strategic thinking than knockout rounds, where winning is the only result that matters. In some situations, in group stages, teams might go for a draw or change a lot of their main starting team to better prepare for upcoming games, so it can make these games a bit harder to predict. Also, it's usually easier to assess a team's future performance based on their previous matches in the competition, so the first games are usually subject to much more variance. I also wanted to give you a closer look at the games with an unexpected outcome that I correctly predicted and what led me to make that decision. Because it's very easy to judge whether someone got it right or wrong after it's all over, but it's much more interesting and valuable for you to understand why those decisions were made. One of the most important moments of this World Cup was the elimination of the USA against Sweden. It was unthinkable before the competition that the reigning champions would be eliminated so early in the tournament, but when I looked at the group stage matches of both teams, one thing became clear to me. The USA really struggled to convert their chances. And it was the same story against Sweden, when they took 22 shots on Musovic and couldn't find the back of the net. Perhaps it was partly because of the fact that the team was polarized, with the likes of Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe getting on in years, and the likes of Sophia Smith perhaps lacking in experience. I also predicted that Sweden would qualify against the USA because they looked untouchable in the group stage, conceding just 1 goal and winning 3 games. Fridolina Rolfo and Blackstenius were a fearsome duo up front, while central defender Amanda Illested scored 4 goals in total and could have been a contender for the Golden Boot award. Another great game for me was France versus Brazil, obviously, in the group stage, where I predicted the exact score, 2-1 for France. After Brazil's 4-0 win over Panama and France's draw with Jamaica, it was really unlikely that France could beat Brazil with such a solid performance. But when you look at Jamaica's performance against France, it was clear that they were much harder to beat than we expected, with one of the best defenses and goalkeepers in the competition. So I thought that even though it was a long shot, France could beat Brazil, who might be overconfident after their easy win over Panama. And luckily, that is exactly what happened. And of course, one of the games that some people called me crazy for predicting was the final, Spain versus England. My decision was based on 2 main points. The first was that the opponents Spain had to face to get to the final were much tougher than the ones England faced. The other was the nature of those games, with an England team that seemed to rely heavily on the clinical finishing of Lauren Hemp up front and played mostly in quick transitions. Spain, on the other hand, relied heavily on collective efforts, with every player, including left-back Olga Carmona to 19-year-old striker Salma Paraluelo, usually starting on the bench, capable of scoring. Spain had the ball in almost all of their games, and in the final in particular, England, unfortunately for them, barely existed. On a side note, it might have been useful to notice that Spain actually underperformed in terms of XGs and England overperformed, which might have indicated that Spain were even more dangerous than they looked and England less dominant than we might have thought throughout this World Cup. To end on a more personal note, I wanted to give you my top 5 and bottom 5 players of the competition. Starting with the bottom 5, I had to give 5th place to Kadidiatou Diani. As much as it pains me to do so, she really disappointed me against Australia, where she seemed to miss everything she attempted and completely missed her game, which contributed greatly to France being knocked out of the World Cup. In 4th place for me, I put Alex Morgan, who missed a number of easy shots that we are not used to seeing her miss at major tournaments. The American legend could be back for one last World Cup, so this may not be the end of the story for her. In 3rd place, I put Christine Sinclair, the Canadian captain, who in her 5th World Cup appearance did not look like the impact player I would have expected her to be for Canada. In 2nd place, I've put Germany's Alexandra Popp, a serial goal scorer who looked so amazing against Morocco and really didn't live up to my expectations against Colombia and South Korea. Even though she scored the goal against South Korea that was refused for an offside, she had a lot of chances that she could have scored to put Germany through the last 16, so I think she really deserved that spot in the 2nd place of the bottom 5 players of the World Cup. Finally, at the top of my flops, I know I'm going to get some hate for this, but I'm going to say it anyway, I'm putting Lauren James in. Yes, the same Lauren James who scored 3 brilliant goals and provided 3 wonderful assists. But that red card against Nigeria was a real shame and meant she missed the quarterfinals and semifinals for her team and started the final on the bench. And when she came on in the second half against Spain, I really expected her to revive the Lionesses' hopes, but unfortunately for them, nothing really happened. And finally, for my top 5 players of the competition, I wanted to start with the defenders, who are often unfairly forgotten despite the crucial role they play for their teams. In 5th place is Wendy Renard. Despite France being knocked out after the quarterfinals, for me, she really is one of the best center-backs and certainly the best in this competition, with Sweden's Amanda Ilested not far behind. In 4th place, I will put Zecira Musovic for her amazing performance against the USA and also throughout the competition. And I have to say that there were a lot of great goalkeepers in this World Cup, which makes me really happy for women's football, as one of the main criticism of women's football is the quality of their goalkeeper. Well, this competition has clearly shown that Mackenzie Arnold, Kata Cole, Daphne van Damsla, Rebecca Spencer, Chamaka Nadozie, Mary Earps, and of course, Zecira Musovic are world-class goalkeepers. In 3rd place, I've put Hinata Miyazawa, who has been the most clinical finisher in the competition, with 5 goals and just 2.55 XGs. Nothing really much to add, she really is a brilliant goal scorer. In 2nd place, I've got Teresa Baleira, the Spanish midfielder, who was the key to winning a lot of balls for Spain throughout the competition and was always at the start of wonderful attacks, such as the goal in the final for Spain. And of course, in 1st place, talking about that goal in the final, my top one is Olga Carmona. Not only did the Spanish captain put Spain ahead in the final, but she also scored an incredible strike in the semi-final against Sweden. I've rarely seen a left-back play that well at a World Cup. This video is now coming to an end, so I just wanted to thank you all for following me throughout this World Cup. With 8,000 views on YouTube, 5,000 on Instagram and 17,000 on TikTok, I really felt like we lived this World Cup together. You are now 14 more subscribers on this YouTube channel, and it might not seem much, but it really means a lot to me, so thank you all for that. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and share it with your teammates. And if you want to join the Data Football Club, please subscribe and don't forget to click on the bell icon. See you soon for another video where football's the game and data's the goal. Bye bye!